Alright, so we got the wheel pant drilled out to fit over the axle, and then we slide on a wheel collar, and then next is a wheel. Now these have hubcaps, but because I've got the wheel pants, I'm just going to leave those off. There's no need to put them on. So wheel kind of fits in, and then the whole thing should slide onto the axle. There we go. Wheel pant is on, the wheel, not so much. There we go. My wheel does not want to turn. It's not catching on nothing. Well, that ain't right. Let's try just the wheel. Alright, let's try it again. Oh, I think inside the wheel pant there's some stuff. If y'all can see that or not. There's like a bunch of nasty stuff in there. Let's see if I can get that out. Yeah, my wheel is spinning on the axle smoothly, but you can see this, I don't know if you can, the debris that's kind of riding on the tread. There was a piece of, I don't know, resin or fiberglass, something that just didn't sit very, or it didn't get cleared off of there, but it's spinning now. I had to chisel it away with my knife. Alright, so now we got to put the wheel collar on the outside of the wheel, and for that I'm just going to use some needle nose pliers. Alright, so putting this wheel pan on is a bit of a process, and I've got this one finished, and that probably took me 15 minutes just to get it done, and this one I've got just on the axle now. So here's how I went about doing it. Don't worry about how it's oriented or nothing right during this, but put your wheel pan on, put your wheel collar on the axle. That's what locates your gear or your wheel on the middle of the axle and gives you spacing from side to side on your wheel pant. And what you're left with is that tiny little bit of axle there. Now that part of the axle has another wheel collar that goes over it, and you kind of work your way out to in. So you want to get this one on, snug it up, tighten it up, and then work and do your inner wheel collar, tighten that up, and then your wheel pant has a set screw as well, which is right here. So you kind of work your way out to in, and the hardest part is getting this wheel collar inside of the wheel pant and then having it drop onto the axle. I've tried with some needle nose pliers, and I've tried multiple different angles and ways to do it, but what I found is just to hold the gear like vertical so that the gravity will just pull the, eventually you'll get the wheel collar on there. So I'm just putting a little dab of Loctite on this one before I get it in there, and I'll try to show you this on camera. It's probably not going to work out very well, but so I'm really not trying to get the wheel collar on the axle right away, just trying to get it in there close to it. And I've got it in my pliers like that. So watch, this one's going to go in first try, I bet. Yeah, sure enough. So anyway, there you go. Wheel collar is on, and I'm going to try to push it down and get it snugged up against the actual wheel. I think I tightened that just a little bit too much. There we go. It slides right down. So anyway, that was a lot of work to get to that point. So that's pretty much the hardest part of the landing gear. So that one's snug. And the other issue I ran into is my this one spins nice and freely versus this one. There's material from the fiberglass that's in the wheel pant. It's right on the top here. It's rubbing against the wheel, but it'll spin and eventually it will run itself down. So, and we'll leave it at that. All right, well, as you can see, I got them finally all together, and that was a little bit more work than I thought, but it's done. A little tedious, working with small little bits and pieces, but anyway, that's the finished result. It rolls okay. They just have to do like what I call, I guess, the self-clearancing. So the more I run this or roll this, it's going to kind of make its own clearance in there. So that one rolls pretty good. So anyway, that part's done. Let's move along and see what we got to do next. All right, next up, gonna put some gear on this thing. Don't really need instructions for how this works. Got two big cutouts in the fuselage, and then just like that, that's where the gear goes. So I've kind of run into a question or issue, I'm not sure. I've laid out every piece of hardware I've got left to use, because I'm trying to find out if there might be an error in the manual, or I'm missing some hardware. But I'm at the point where I need to put the gear on the fuselage and basically secure it. And it says you take these nylon straps, and you got flat ones for the rear, and then you have saddled ones for the front, which makes perfectly good sense. And you see there's actually holes that are pre-drilled in the covering, I believe. But if you look also, there's 2 holes in the bottom, there, 2 there, 2 here, 2 here. And I think those are for your floats that are optional, because if you turn the fuselage up and if you look inside, which I'm gonna try to do, and you look down in your, below all that, this camera will focus. I don't think we're going to get a good focus on it. There. You can see there's a whole bunch of blind nuts. And usually your blind nuts are like an 8/32 or some kind of machine type screw, which would make sense for what like these guys are. There's 4 there. There's 4 more different size. And then here's another 4. So we have a lot of these kind, but the instruction specifically says to use a M3 by 10 sheet metal screw, specifically sheet metal screw. So they don't really give a good picture of it, but they are silverish colored, it looks like, on the heads. So I've got 4 of those here that fit the description. The rest of these, nothing really fits the description. Maybe that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's still going to be short. So yeah, I'm not real sure which to use, and I don't have any other parts bags or hardware. I've got this, which is float hardware, which has the same stuff in it with the same screws. So just scratching my head trying to figure it out. I'm looking through all the other parts bags and everything else, and I don't have anything left that fits the description of what they're looking for. So Yep, we'll keep searching, try to figure this out. Alright, after doing a little digging and looking at the digital PDF version of the plans, I can see that these screws that hold the landing gear on are silver colored, and it says sheet metal screw, so these are the only ones that are silver and fit the description. So I feel comfortable putting those in, giving them a try. So it just didn't look very clear on the pictures of what ones we should have been using there. So but you've got two sets of straps, one flat and then one of them they call saddled, and the flat straps go on the rear and the saddled ones go on the front. To briefly switch to the iPhone here because we're working inside of some tight spaces here. But that's our slots for elevator and our rudder servos. They are pre-drilled just like the aileron servos were. So we have these tiny little pilot holes drilled out for us. The only problem with them is they're just drilled out, and we need to take our servo screw or bolt, whatever here, and we need to basically run it in and out of each one of these. And what that does is kind of put a little bit of a thread into the wood, and then once we do that, we can put some thin CA into that hole on all of these, and that thin CA will kind of harden the wood up and strengthen it just a little bit, and that makes it a little bit stronger, more durable, a little stronger. But the tool I'm using for this was actually out of this kind of a weird ratchet set, and my 2mm driver, it's just too tall. The handle it wouldn't fit inside of this tight area, so I'm just using this, and luckily it's not that hard to turn, and you can just do it by hand. So it is a little tight though, and I hate to think about dropping this in there, but it's a little bit annoying to work in this cramped space. But look at the room they give you to work though. Literally my arm is all the way from the firewall, my elbow's hitting the firewall, and my hand's all the way back here. So they knew what they were doing when they designed this. They said we got to give people a chance to get in there and actually work on it. So, but the iPhone does pretty good. My other camera is really nice and good quality, all that stuff, but good old iPhone, it's holding focus really well. And anyway, good video. But I'm gonna do this for the last two holes. Try not to drop that in, and then we'll be ready to drop some servos in. But before I drop the servos in, I'll show you how to set those up. We'll be right back. Alright, I got every one of the holes kind of reamed out, drilled out, whatever you want to call it, with the servo screw. Now I'm just going to put some thin CA in each hole. Just a drop. You don't need to go crazy with it. And that'll let those holes harden up and kind of get a little bit of strength in them. I did both of these. These are where I guess your throttle servos could go. They give you an option left or right. So I just did both because I don't know where my motor is going to go yet, or how it's going to go. But CA is readily available. All right, so that's all those. We'll let that dry up, and we'll we'll show you how to set up these servos. So I've got the two servos I'm going to use for elevator and rudder setup, and I've already done this, which is hook it up to it's a battery checker, but servo checker as well. And I cycle the servo through its whole motion, so you go a full range and then you set it to center. And when it's centered, your arms, you want them to be about as perpendicular as possible. So these two arms matched out pretty good. Now, if you have one of them that's a tooth off this way and a little bit off, just try flipping it to this one, or flip it the other way around. So right now, the way these are oriented is the drive output is going to be towards the nose. So that's why I have them oriented this way, because your push rods go on the outboard side of your cabin. So this happened to work out really good. These two arms are off of high-tech servos, and they recommended having a measurement. If you could see that there, those numbers 13, 16, gotta get my eyes checked, 29, that wouldn't make sense. 22, that's your distances, 13, 16, 19, 22, that's what it is. So anyway, 22 is this outer hole, which I've already taken my 2mm pin drill and just kind of reamed it out just a little bit on both. And as far as the instructions go, that's what they want you to have, about 21 to 22 millimeters of arm. So now that that's done, they're unplugged. We're just gonna drop them in and secure them. One thing I just remembered real quick, if you haven't ever done servos, when you buy them new, they come with these rubber grommets and brass eyelets, or I guess you call them. The proper way to install it is rubber grommets obviously go on the servo lugs, but your brass eyelets like this need to go down towards the wood. That way when you tighten the servo up with your screws, you're not like cutting into the wood with this end, which is really sharp. So what that does is spread out the load of the servo screw and actually lets it bite into the rubber, so you get some really nice cushioning, dampening, especially on a gas engine like we're going to be running. So anyway, that's how those look, and they should be a perfect fit for this plane. If you're wondering about the specs, that's the specs for them. 130 ounce inch, they're kind of slow, 0.17 degrees per 0.17 seconds per 60 degrees. So, and they're high voltage, they're good up to 8.4 volts, which I'm just gonna run just like that. 2-cell LiPo, that's a 3-cell, but I'm gonna run a 2-cell LiPo. But anyway, these are out of the donor plane for this one, which was a 10cc Ultra Stick, and they flew on that just great. So, all right, let's get these installed. All right, I didn't really film any of that because it's a lot of work, but those two servos, dropping those holes, and you can see where I put my wires through, and it's almost impossible for me to show, but there's a bulkhead down there that has two small holes that those wires have to come through. So it's damn near impossible to kind of fish the wire up this way and try to get it to go through there. So what I did was I kind of fished this wire here, hard to see. I fished that through that way and pulled it up with some needle nose pliers, and I hooked the servo on that end of it and just kind of pulled it through there nice, carefully, and slowly, and got everything to come through. But those servos are a little bit bigger than the slot, so I had to whittle away a little bit of the wood to get them to fit. But I'm also just kind of looking at planning out how I'm gonna do planning ahead, how I'm gonna lay everything out. So these seats are, flat bottom, and they've got those two holes right there that allow them to be secured into the floor with these bolts here. So the problem is your wiring. Like if I wanted to run that wire up here, there's no way for the wire to go beneath the seat unless you kind of modify it, cut it out, which I'm thinking of doing. Or I'm just thinking of not even running the seats at all and just kind of having it an open layout like this. And throttle servos will be over here. I can kind of tuck the wire, everything will come out of here and have a receiver mounted right here. and maybe a battery. I don't know, it depends on the CG, but yeah, it's gonna take a little bit of work to kind of figure out where everything's gonna go. But anyway, we're moving along. It's just at this point where you kind of have to start planning ahead your next step and kind of what you want to do and where you want to put everything. So, you know, a little bit more work to do. All right, I'm at the point with this model assembly here where I just need to start kind of doing my thing. Instruction manual's been good. It's got us to this point, but where I'm starting to figure out where stuff's gonna go in the plane as far as receiver, batteries, all that stuff, fuel tank. That's pretty obvious. That's gonna go here. Anyway, we're just gonna set up these servos and they're push rods. So what I've done is I've just plugged them into a receiver, powering it, got a satellite, and I've set up a model and made sure it's a new model, and my trims are centered and my channels are working basically elevator and rudder. So what I'm gonna do is come back here, I'm gonna hook up the push rod. I'm gonna hook that up to the rudder. I'm gonna center the rudder, and what that's gonna do is position this push rod wire on top of my hole where I want it to go into. So what I'm gonna do then is mark it, bend a 90-degree bend into this wire, and then I'm gonna stick it in the servo horn, put a keeper on it, and that will be done. So sounds like a lot, but it's really not too bad. And it's hard to film, so I'm probably just gonna do it. All right, so got my clevis hooked up back here on the rudder, and a quick and easy way to center your flight control is just using these two popsicle sticks and two clamps. And what that does is squeeze the rudder to join up with the vertical fin so that you have a pretty much perfectly centered flight control surface. And then what that does is that pushes this rod to a position over that hole there where we can put a little mark with the Sharpie, and then we'll bend it, and that'll be that one. It doesn't have to be precisely perfect. You actually got some room on your clevis to work with as far as threading it in, threading it out, just to kind of fine tune it. So just get it close. That's what it looks like right there. Since this piece of the wire's got a bend, that's obviously not going to go through the back end of the plane. So we have to send it through the front with the threaded end for your clevis. So you just have to send that back through from this direction. It's always fun. When you push your push rods back through like this, just be careful that where that push rod exits, this is the rudder, it's not always a perfectly clean exit, and sometimes you can punch the covering and almost there. See, there we go. See, that's a nice clean exit on that one. So sometimes though it'll punch out like right here or there, and you'll have an extra hole in your covering. So but I'm gonna go ahead and put this on my servo arm. This is hard to do with a phone in one hand. So put that on like that, and then on the back end, what we're gonna do is just thread on our clevis and basically hook it back up.